There we are.
There we are. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here on this nice sunny day. I'm in New Brunswick, so I'm far, far away. As much as I resist technology, I am grateful that it's around and it allows me to do things like this with you folks. So, like Christine said, I've got 3 grown kids, 37, 35, and 28 or 9. I think he just turned 28. My grandkids are ranging from 2 to almost 14. My oldest one is going to high school this year, so that makes me feel very, very old. I remember when I held her in my arms as a newborn baby. So things change, life goes on, kids grow up, and you survive. So sometimes parenting is just really all about surviving. So what I'm hoping to do today is just give you a few ideas and things to think about to help you in that survival and maybe help you thrive a little bit. A few caveats. So, okay, there we go. I am not a technological wizard, so I may stumble a little bit about this. So, a few caveats that I sort of like to start with just to set the stage and put people at ease, hopefully. So these are a few of my own belief systems when I'm working and talking with parents. So there is no right or wrong way to parent. So don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. Short of abusing your child, which is not okay. Pretty much everything else is on the table. We all do it differently. Our kids, for the most part, all thrive. So we really need to realize that this is a long game, not a short game. So the day-to-day stuff can feel really, really long, but when you're as old as I am and you look back, you think, oh my God, where did the time go? It flies by. So there's a saying that says the days are long, but the years are short. And in hindsight, when you get a little older and your kids are growing a little bit more, you'll see that it's very true. So it is a long game, and you need to be kind to yourself. It's we live in a world where sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of support, and the first one that we're hardest on is ourselves. So I want people to think about being kind to yourself. We're going to make mistakes. I made more mistakes than I could even count, because the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today, I didn't know when I was raising my children. So one of the gifts that I was given by working at OPCC was the ability to learn some of this stuff as I went along. And I always joke that I didn't do most of this stuff with my kids. They turned out okay. But I have 5 grandchildren who are my do-overs. So things that I'm really intrigued about and want to try out or observe, I've got grandkids now that I can do that with. So that's kind of fun. And grandchildren, by the way, are the reward for parenting. So yeah, wait a long time, but the investment's worth it, because grandparenting is way better than parenting. It's much easier. So we get good at parenting once our kids are grown and gone. And that's really just because it's a long game, and it's a learning journey. We learn things as we go. Our kids teach us things. We teach each other things. So it really is a lifelong journey of learning. So once our kids have grown, it's like we've got the gift of hindsight, and we can look back and go, oh yeah, that was okay. Missed a bullet here by the looks of it, but parents are their children's first and most influential teachers. So I really encourage parents to listen to people, take what people say into consideration, but you ultimately are responsible for your child, and you have the most influence with your child. So we need to remember that and not give that influence and that, I won't say power because it's not power, but that influence and that responsibility, really. We don't want to give that away to anybody else. So don't let anybody else tell you things that don't work for you and make you think you have to do things a different way. You know your child best. I also truly believe in all circumstances. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I believe that in any given circumstance, even when it's hard, we do the best we can with what we've got, whether it's what we know or the situation we find ourselves in. Parents always want the best for their children, even if they don't quite know how to get to that. I never question parents' intent. So that's important to remember. And I think we can give our children that same consideration. So kids do the best they can every day with what they have available, whether that's developmental, situational, emotional. There's a lot of things that get in the way. So even when our children are tantruming on the floor, in that moment, they are actually doing the best they can. And if we sort of look at kids with that lens, it allows us to be a little more patient, a little more compassionate, a little less emotional, and we're able to wonder a little more about what's going on instead of trying just to fix the problem right away or get rid of the behavior. We can always learn new things. So it's, again, a lifelong journey. So be open to learning, or at least contemplating. My job is not to change your mind about anything. My job is not to influence you or make you feel like you're not doing the right thing or you should be doing something different. Really educational opportunities, whether it's books you read or websites you visit or people you see like me, really the job is just to give you something to think about and consider. If it resonates with you, explore it. If it doesn't, that's fine, throw it away. This is a bit of a tough one sometimes. It's never too late. So even if you learn these things and you feel like, oh my goodness, you know, I've ruined my child, they're 8 and I've ruined them now, it's never too late. I had lots of adventures with adolescents when my kids were young, and there were times where I thought, okay, it's too late. They're too old now. And I'm here to tell you they're not. And as a parent, giving up is never an option. So you can take a break and reflect, but you got to pick yourself up and start over again. Your kids need you. My favorite parenting mantra is fake it till you make it. Because we don't know what we're doing a lot of the time. And we can't let our kids know we don't know what we're doing, because that creates some stress and anxiety in them. So you fake it. And if you can fake it with an Academy Award winning performance, your kids will believe you. They will believe that you know what you're doing. And that gives them a lot of security and trust. So if you're just kind of going through the motions and faking it, that's okay. We all do it. And our kids might catch on when they're a little older, but by then we've done a lot of the hard work. So it's okay to pretend like you know what you're doing. I would encourage you to do that. And when you think about your parenting village, it should lift you up and help you. You should walk away from a conversation with somebody or a group or whatever, and it should lift you up and make you feel better. And if you're feeling less than worthy, if you're feeling like you're always wrong, or you're always questioning yourself, it's time to find a new village. We used to have family and neighbors, and villages just sort of used to appear in our lives, and they don't anymore. Sometimes we have to go out seeking them. So it can be a bit tricky to find the village that works for you. But I would encourage you to find the one that makes you feel good about yourself and good about what you're doing, and you know, those kinds of things. Those are important things to. And it's important to have a village. Parenting was never meant to be done alone. So it's too hard. So those of you, if there's anybody there that knows me, you know that I love this guy. We're talking about superheroes today, and this is my superhero. This is Dr. Gordon Neufeld, and he's a developmental psychologist in Vancouver. So I use his work a lot. So most of what I'm talking about is not original stuff. It's my interpretations and my sharing of other people's ideas that kind of resonate with me. So the first thing we're going to talk about is sort of the stages of attachment. So I wanted to give you just an introduction to Neufeld. This is a 3-minute video, and he talks very quickly about the 6 stages, really just lists them. So once this is over, we'll go through and we'll talk a little bit more about each of the stages and what it means for you and your family. So hopefully I make this work properly. There we go.
I've been spending my life trying to put the pieces together of how attachment works. And in fact, I had a wonderful opportunity of taking a whole year off just to be able to study all the attachment theories throughout the ages, actually, and see how it is that attachment is meant to happen. It's a beautiful story, really. I'll try to tell it very quickly and very simply. In the the first year of life, the child does attach to one to be with, to be in sight and smell and hearing. But by the second year of life, a new way of attaching should open up, in which the child wants to be liked, not only with, but liked. And this is the key to language acquisition, to stamping our form on their behavior, to key so many things. If that goes well, the third part, by the third year, it should have, the child becomes preoccupied with belonging and becomes preoccupied with loyalty, to be on the same side as, which is a different way of closeness, but to take the same side, to serve and obey. And that's when the obedience instincts begin to be there. By the fourth year of life, you should see in a child a huge quest for significance to matter, because he feels close now when he is dear to those that he's attached to. Now, if everything unfolds properly, the fifth year is incredible. The limbic system, the command center, or the amygdala, the command center, the limbic system, the emotional brain pulls out, all it stops. And the child gives his heart to whomever he is attached to. He falls in love. And he's deeply emotionally attached to his kitten, to his grandma, to anything that is there. And this is amazing. And it's so important, because when the child develops at that level, it sets the stage for the rest of parenting. We cannot parent children whose hearts we do not have. We can't parent even our grandchildren whose hearts we do not have, or adult children. This is absolutely essential. So children need to fall deeply into attachment, and we need to make it easy for them. The last stage is a very interesting stage. If it's safe to attach, there's no defensiveness emotional, then the child actually wants to share all that is within his heart. And so the 6-year-old is busy telling secrets, and not to have any secrets that divide. But this is the beginning of psychological intimacy, which should characterize our marriages and tensions. And so we've got all kinds of intimacies: with, like, belonging, mattering, our heart, emotional intimacy, and the private psychological intimacy. And this is the context in which children are meant to be raised. So the beginning, the infancy and toddler is just the beginning of a wonderful unfolding and development of the capacity for relation.
So that's him. He's lovely. So I'd like to talk just a little bit more about each of those stages. There's a lot of content here, so we can't go into it too deeply, but it's important, I think, that we think about and understand these different stages. And what I'd like you to do as I'm talking about this is think about a deep attached relationship that you have, whether it's with a parent or your spouse or a friend. And what you'll find is, as I talk about this, these are human attachment stages. So this is not just about children attaching to adults and adults attaching to children. This is about human attachment. So we attach in these stages with our friends, with our spouses, all those kinds of things. So it's kind of interesting and fun to think about somebody that you're really attached to, and go back and think about what happened in the beginning, which is the census stage. And this is a stage where all of the senses are engaged in feeling contact and closeness. We know that the primary stage the primary sense when children are infants is touch. And there was a time when I was growing up, maybe not when you guys were, you're younger than I am, but many of us were raised with a philosophy of, crying it out, and you don't want to spoil that baby. They have to learn, and we know now in all of the attachment and the brain research that that's actually not true. When we don't respond to our babies, when we don't hold them and pick them up when they need it, we actually change the way they're wired, and we create a defendedness. Those feelings of fear and aloneness and those kinds of things are far too much for a young baby to handle. So they become protected. And we don't want that to happen at any age, but particularly not when they're infants. So you'll realize, or you'll observe that, when your baby's crying and you pick them up, they stop crying. Well, there's a sign. And often one parent, that works better with one parent than the other, not always mom. Sometimes it's dad. Sometimes it switches back and forth. Sometimes it's grandma or grandpa. So that physical touch, you'll see in these pictures, this dad sleeping with his baby. And that's where babies are the most comfortable and the most relaxed. So baby wearing, picking up those babies, not just when they're in distress, but just carry them around with you. It's okay to do those kinds of things now. We know we're not spoiling babies by doing this. Christine's a sleep consultant, so she can correct me because I might be a little out of touch with this, but even co-sleeping, there are safe ways to co-sleep with your children if you choose to do that. We're a culture that doesn't necessarily subscribe to that practice, but if it's something that you feel strongly you want to do, or culturally you would like to do it, just make sure that you're looking at how to do it in a safe way. You're not going to nestle that baby up right beside you and fall asleep with them. There are things to prevent accidents, but co-sleeping is certainly, it works for babies. It may not work for parents as well, but it definitely works for babies and children. That's where they're meant to be. We're one of the few cultures, if not the only culture here in North America, that actually expects babies and children to sleep apart. And imagine you're a child and you're saying goodnight to your parents and they tuck you into your big bed all by yourself while they go off, your mom and your dad, and nestle up and sleep together. So why is it that we have adults that need to be together when they sleep, but we expect these very young children to sort of fend for themselves in the big bed in the dark room? So it's just an interesting thing to think about. And sometimes when holding doesn't work, you can talk to your baby, sing to your baby, and all of a sudden that will soothe them. So that hearing sense is also something you can use to your advantage. The most obvious taste sense is breastfeeding, but babies put everything in their mouth, including parts of you, your hands, your fingers, your arms. That's all part of this connection process. So it's really, really important that we think about those senses and we optimize those, particularly in the first year. This is how babies are wired to connect. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing all those senses to connect with our babies. The nice thing about this model is it's not okay, now we're done stage one, let's go to stage two. We add on. So we have the senses as the first stage, generally in the first year of life. This is how it unfolds. It doesn't always unfold in the timeline that I talk about, but generally from a developmental perspective, this is the first year. And in the second year, it's about being the same. So this is where you find your toddlers mimicking you. They want to do what you do. They want to help you. And while it doesn't feel like help to have a 2-year-old or an 18-month-old doing laundry with you, it's definitely not helpful. It is an important part of the attachment process. So we want to encourage children to do the things that we do, because it aligns us in that relationship where we're leading and they're following, and that's the relationship you want to foster moving forward for a very long time. You want to be able to influence those children. Like Neufeld mentioned in his video, this is the stage where language acquisition often comes into play. So when you're talking and reading and singing to your baby, they're mimicking you, and this is how they're learning language. So again, you can take advantage of that and recognize that it is really an important part of connecting with you. So they want to dress like you. They're putting your shoes on. They're, by the time they're close to 2, they might start to role play some of the things. They want to pretend they're you. I'm mommy, I'm daddy, I'm uncle so-and-so. So it's their way of being close to you when they can't maybe actually be with you, or those kinds of things. So recognizing in that second year of life, so from 1 to 2, that being like you is actually a function of attachment. So while it can be annoying and it can slow things down, Parenting is really a slow process. We're trying to fast track it a lot, and it's not working out for us, and it's not working out for our children. So when we slow down and recognize that this is what they're doing and this is a function of building attachment, it allows us to recognize it and appreciate it really, and see it for what it is. So the third stage is belonging and loyalty. Often, so this is the third year. So often, this is when families will have a second child. The older one's 2 now, so maybe we can squeeze another one in. And when we look at this stage of attachment, having another baby in this stage of attachment can be very, very difficult because children are very, it's one. So they can't share yet. They can't share toys, much less share you. So they don't understand that you can love them and a baby, or you can love them and mommy, or you can love them and daddy. So often you'll get children at this stage. If you're hugging your spouse, they're weaseling their way in the middle here. It's like, no, no, no. You'll get a lot of that's my mommy or my daddy. So you get this sense of possessiveness. And more importantly than my mommy and my daddy is they want to hear that they belong to you. So that's my Susie. This is my Johnny. So they really, really want to feel that sense that they belong to you, and that you're on their side. So this is another thing when children get into trouble, particularly socially, they get into fights and arguments with friends and whatever. One of the first responses often is, well, what did you do? Well, that doesn't feel very loyal. so it puts a little bit of a wedge in the attachment when we say to kids, well, what did you do? If you've got a problem and you go to your friend, what you want to hear is, oh my goodness, really? That's awful. I don't understand why they did that. So you want somebody to take your side. And even if you were in the wrong, you still want them to take your side. And with children, it's important that we take their side even when they're wrong, because what it does is it opens up the conversation. And as you work through it with them, children will talk to you more, children will open up to you more. And eventually, as they get older, not necessarily at this age, when you talk through things, suddenly you come to realize, oh, well, maybe I could have done that differently, or maybe that was my fault. Again, not at this stage, but these are all setting stages for conversations and things that will happen as they get older. So as much as you can, help your child feel like you're on their side, and not only do you belong to them, but they belong to you. And you will foster that relationship. These last 3 stages go a little deeper. So the first 3 are kind of superficial. They're not as developmentally deep, but now in stage 4, in the 4th year or 2nd, 3rd year of life, things are getting a little bit deeper now. So these become deeper attachment ideas. So significance. Do you remember when you were dating somebody that you really, really thought you were connected to? And one of the questions you asked them was, why do you love me? And it makes some people squirm, and that's okay. But it's that, why am I important? Why do I matter? What role do I play in this family? What do you love about me? So I love this picture. Every day in 100 small ways, our children ask, do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter? And often their behavior, which we'll talk about in the next session, reflects our response. So if we help children feel heard, if we help children feel like we see them and we understand and they matter, you're going to get corresponding behavior. They're going to be more relaxed. They're going to be more receptive to you. They're going to be less stressed. So it's important in our day-to-day interactions that we help children understand, not just with our words, but with our actions, how important they are and what it is we love about them. And it's the small things in parenting that over time make a big difference. So we want to, without putting kids into roles, like you're the smart one and you're the athlete and you're the funny one. We want to tell each of our kids and show each of our children individually. And the more children you have, the harder parenting gets. Why they matter and what they bring to the family, and why they're important. So something to think about. We all want to know we matter to somebody. This is probably the most obvious and one of my favorite stages. And it's my favorite stage because I remember my first granddaughter spent a lot of time with us when she was growing up. And this is the falling in love stage. So this is 2-year-olds will say, you say, I love you to a 2-year-old, and they'll say, I love you. And it's mimicking. So take it when you can get it, but understand that a 2-year-old, it's really about being the same as you. So they're talking the same as you. I love you. I love you. So they're parroting. When a 5-year-old tells you they love you, they love you. It's a very different kind of communication. And like Neufeld said, they love their kitties, they love their bunnies, they love everything. But there's a very vulnerable, deep, heartfelt love that happens in this stage. So we want to make sure that our kids feel our love for them, but you will also feel that back when children do artwork. And this is one of the things I remember most about my granddaughter. She was very artsy. Not all kids are, so if they don't do art, it's okay. But there was a period of time for a couple of months where when she was 5, everything she did had hearts in it. So she made me ensembles of jewelry out of paper and pipe cleaners, and it was always hearts, heart tiaras, heart rings, heart jewel, like just hearts everywhere. And those of you who have older kids who like to do crafts, you might remember that this kind of thing happens. So there's lots of signs. Kids will tell you in different ways, not just with words. So watch for those cues that they're falling deeply in love. The flip side of this one is that when you open yourself up to be vulnerable and fall in love deeply, you run the risk of being hurt. So this is where often we get a lot of social challenges. So kids in kindergarten, preschool, you can't come to my birthday party, and all of a sudden it's like devastation. So you have these children who have given their hearts to their friends, and their friends don't necessarily, they don't have the maturity to know what to do with that little heart. So they just do what kids do. But at this stage, children are very vulnerable to being hurt deeply. So you may get a lot of tears and a lot of hurt and things like that, primarily from social interactions that children just don't understand, and they're really hurt. 2-year-olds, they don't get hurt by relationships much, but 5-year-olds do. They can get deeply hurt. So we want to protect them a little bit from that. And that doesn't mean we don't give them social experiences and we don't expose them to things where they might get hurt. It's about how we respond to them when they do get hurt. And the last stage is the deepest stage. And it's one that even as adults, I think many of us still seek to find somebody that we feel really deeply knows us, somebody that we're comfortable sharing anything with. And often that's reciprocated. Don't share too much about your life with your kids when they're young. But it's this, there's a depth to it, and you kind of know it when you see it. And again, it can be a very difficult stage in terms of vulnerability. So attachment is a vulnerable process, and these stages of attachment are needed in order for children to mature. So one of the things that we kind of get mixed up with in our culture is we expect children to be mature. And maturity is a developmental process as much as it is just a growth and experience process. And the road to maturity is achieving these stages of attachment. So we want to watch that we're not, that we're focusing more on this relationship piece and not so much about the maturity. We're very focused on our kids behaving and all sorts of things like that. And we'll talk about it in other sessions, but kids are not designed to behave the way we expect them to. So that's a lot of information. So I'm going to take 5 seconds. Are there any questions, Christine, that we want to chat about now? While
There's no questions in the chat, but I welcome, this is a good time. If anybody wants to touch base with any of that, feel free to unmute or reach out for any questions that you might have.
It's okay if there's not questions, by the way. I know people need time to process, so I totally understand that.
Yeah, nothing coming in right now, Nikki. I think we're all thinking.
Or everybody's thinking. Okay. So we're going to move off of that a little bit and talk just very briefly about why does it matter? Why is this relationship attachment thing, you know, it's been around forever, but it's really hit the forefront in terms of parenting probably in the last 20 to 25 years. So you've probably heard lots about attachment parenting and all that kind of stuff. So why does it matter? And the funny thing here is attachment parenting is not a new idea. We've been doing it for thousands of years. And what's happened is we've lost our way and we've tried to override it because attachment parenting relationships is the way nature intended us to raise kids. We have always raised children in the context of an attachment relationship. And somewhere along the way, I don't know quite where, we lost our way and we started letting priorities changed, and we had, you know, authors and lots of people telling us, you know, we should be doing it this way. When I was being raised, I'm 63 almost. When I was being raised, it was very much a behaviorist kind of philosophy. So you just squash the behavior, and many of us probably grew up with that, even if you're not as old as I am, because we tend to parent generationally, so we parent the way we were parented. But the focus in society was really about compliance and obedience and making kids behave and extinguishing bad behavior. So there was this social acceptability. And I think it's still the priority, but now we have all this other information that conflicts with the way it was done with us when we were younger. So now we have this conflict about, yes, we want our kids to behave, but yes, we want to, you know, we want them to love us, and so we have this very mixed up mishmash of things that are kind of fogging out and blurring our ideas about what we need to do. So one of the reasons I love Neufeld is he's quite clear in his messaging, and it really is a developmental lens. So he is a developmental psychologist. He's not, he focuses on human development, not other things. So it is the way that we were naturally intended to raise children and teach children. So a lot of these ideas are not just for parents, they work for teachers. Because teaching is also a relationship. So if you don't like your teacher, you're not as inclined to learn from that teacher as if it's you like the teacher, and more importantly, you think that teacher likes you. And then you're willing to work for them, and you'll go above and beyond and tell the other kids in your class to listen to the teacher, kind of thing. So teaching is also requires a relationship. Neufeld talks a lot about an alpha parent and alpha children, and that's a big topic as well. But what attachment and relationship focused parenting does is it puts us back in charge of our children, and we need to be in charge of them. They are immature, they are young until they're, depending on what you read, somewhere between 20 and now they're saying 30. So when we look at these particularly young preschool children and babies, there is nothing in those children that is ready developmentally to be in charge of themselves or each other. So we need to take on that boss relationship. We don't like to be the boss for some reason, but we need to be the boss. And you can be a friendly, nurturing, you know, good boss. We all have had bosses that inspire us, and we want to work for them. And we've all had bosses where it's like, you know what, I'm going to do the minimum. This quiet quitting idea that's come out now. I'm going to do what I have to do to get my paycheck. but I'm not doing any extra because I don't particularly like you as a boss. So we can be a boss with our kids and still be that boss that inspires and motivates our children and influences our children. So that's the alpha boss, the alpha parent. We have a lot of alpha children growing up in our families right now, and that's creating some difficulties for everybody because that's not the way children were designed to be. It's not the position in the relationship. So there's the alpha, and then there's what he calls the dependent. And we need children in dependent mode. So they need to be able to look to us to take direction from us and those kinds of things. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in another session as well. The relationship gives children the conditions they need to thrive. It creates a sense of comfort and security. And when children can rest and relax and be kids and not worry about so many things that our kids are now worrying about, then they can get on with the business of growing up. So when they're too preoccupied with stress or with adult problems and things like that, it gets in the way of children's development. So we want to make sure that attached, in charge relationship embraces those kids and gives them that soft place to land and that place with boundaries and all the things that kids need to thrive. And believe it or not, it makes parenting easier. Parenting is harder now than it ever has been, and it's a question to be asked. If we have so much information now, I mean, everywhere you look, somebody's got an opinion about parenting and some advice. And with all of this access to parenting information, why are we the generation that has, in some cases, the most struggle parenting? So this idea of parenting within the context of a relationship and attachment actually makes parenting easier because it is the natural way to do things. Attachment parenting strongly influences children's positive sense of self. So self-esteem is always something that parents are concerned about. And we're like a mirror to our children. So children see themselves first through the eyes of the people they're attached to. So when we delight in our children and we smile and we appreciate our children and we tell them how significant they are and we show them that we love them, that mirror, that reflection back teaches them things about themselves. I'm lovable, I'm worthwhile, all those things that come from self. So we want to make sure that those relationships are feeding that positive self-esteem as much as possible. It makes children teachable. I mentioned, if you don't like your teacher, whether that's your parent or a teacher, you're less likely to work for them and to learn from them. We know children have better physical and mental health in solid attached relationships, and children are secure and curious about the world. So when you think about sending kids off to school, we want kids that are feeling secure about themselves and the world, and they're curious, because that facilitates learning. That's just a few ideas to extend all of that. Now, some of this I've probably already mentioned. So parenting is an inside job. It's about who we are. It's more than what we do. So you can have all of the best strategies. You can read all the good books. You can have all the strategies down in place. But if you don't have the relationship in alignment, or you don't have the relationship at all, none of those strategies will work. So parenting is not about strategizing. It's about the heart. We use our heads a lot, and our kids are functioning out of a heart level. And we try and use logic and rationale and things like that because we have that part of the brain on overdrive. And children's brains in that area are not even developed yet. So we're trying to rationalize with irrational beings. So we want to parent more from the inside, as opposed to letting the outside world influence us. I know I've heard so much from parents, so-and-so told me to do this and this and this, and I did it, but it just didn't feel right. And you need to trust those feelings because, again, you know your children best. You know how you want to parent them. So don't let other people influence you in a negative way about parenting. Childhood is a vulnerable time. Neufeld talks about this idea of resting in the relationship. So that means that the adult is in charge. And when the adult is in charge and children rest, they basically take things for granted. They take us for granted. They take it for granted we're always going to be there. They take it for granted that we're always going to meet their needs. They take it for granted that we're going to take care of them. So all of those things. And then when children can do that, again, they can start to explore and grow and develop in the ways that they need to. Children who don't have those things that they can take for granted tend to be chasing their parents or the adults in their lives around for those things. And that consumes them. And again, it gets in the way of their typical development. So we don't want kids chasing us for relationship, chasing us for affection, chasing us for affirmation. We want to give those things to children before they even know they need them, if you can, and give them to them abundantly so that children can just take it for granted. And it's hard to do. And because we're so busy and sometimes distracted, some of these things come very naturally, but other things get in our way. So it's not like you have to learn how to do this. You just have to be tuned in a little bit more maybe and find some ways in your own life to take some of your own stress and your own things away that are getting in the way of you being able to sort of take on this natural, instinctive kind of parenting. It is always our responsibility as the adult to initiate and maintain a relationship. So again, children should not be chasing us for relationships, for relationship needs. If you think a child needs a hug, you want to give them a hug before they ask for it. We don't want to ask kids if they need a hug. We're the adult, we're supposed to know. So again, we fake it. You need a hug. And the child's like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I do. They don't even know they need, but you can convince them with confidence and with this alpha kind of presence with parenting. You can convince, I know what you need a snack. And kids are like, oh, okay. They just default. So it is our responsibility. And if a child asks for a hug, that's fine. We miss lots of cues and lots of opportunities. But what we want to do then is we want to hug that kid bigger. How did you know that I wanted a hug? Or I wanted to give you a hug? Come here. And you hug and you hug and you hug and you hug. And the best way to know that a child is filled up with a hug is to not let go until they push you. So let the child, so if you consider a hug like a gas tank, for those kids who like to be hugged, not all of them do, but if you've got a really snuggly kid, just snuggle. Don't look at your watch while you're doing it, because that takes away from the experience, but just hold them. Try not to count, try to just enjoy the moment. And what you're doing, it's like a gas tank. You're filling this child up. And when the child's tank is full, they will squirm and push away, and they will walk away from you, and they're done. But that filling up of the tank carries them for a really long time. And there's a lot of benefits to having kids with full tanks. So we just want to be the boss again. So we want to be the boss of the relationship. We want to take charge of it. We don't want our kids, as much as possible, chasing us around for it. Multiple attachments are great. People worry about this. If your child has one good, solid, deep attached relationship, they'll thrive. So this isn't something, we don't need a lot of them. More is better. But don't worry if you're a single parent and you feel like it's just you, or it's okay. We can function and grow just fine with one or two deep attachments. I talked a little bit about the alpha dependent, and again, I'll talk about that a little bit more next week, but children need to be in dependent mode for us to be able to teach them and influence them. So when we have children who are fighting to be the boss, then it's like two bosses in a company. It's like, who's going to win? And unfortunately, often the adults are defaulting and going, okay, partly because we don't know what to do, partly because sometimes we're tired and we just can't fight the fight. There's lots of reasons, but often we're letting our kids take on that alpha role. And we become the dependent, so the kids are taking care of us. And that can be very stressful for kids and parents. And like I mentioned before, growing into adulthood takes between 20, 25, 30 years, some say now. It is a biological process and it has to follow a system or a process, if you will. I don't plant things in the spring and in the fall and expect my tulips to come up in the snow. It's not the right season. So child development is about the right seasons. So there'll be many seasons, but don't get too disheartened and too frustrated when your young children are behaving badly, because when they're 25, they probably won't be. So it is, making mistakes and doing the things that young children do is all a developmental process, and it's part of their learning curve. So there are things we can do to respond, but just know that these are normal things. Children make mistakes, children defy you. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Most of the stuff that happens with young children has a developmental root to it. So don't beat yourselves up. Not your fault. So these are just some ideas. People ask, how do I know when my child's attached? And I debated about putting this one in because I know what people can be like they read it and it's like, oh my God, my child doesn't do that. It's a check. This is not a checklist. These are things that we can look for, and you'll see them in some and you won't see them in others. And it does not mean your child is not attached. There's lots of reasons that your children might not do some of these things. A lot of it is developmental, some of it is temperamental. But these are some of the things over time that we can start to think about as things where attachment might be in play. So children look to you for direction. Again, we're the boss, we're the leader, we're the compass, as Neufeld calls it, whatever you want to call yourself. We need to be leading our children. And one of the challenges is we're really good and we want to lead, but for whatever reason, our children aren't wanting to follow us. And that's that dependent mode. So when you see children following parents, it's like, okay, the relationship is probably in a good place in that moment. Children live very much in the next 30 seconds. So, they love you 1 minute, they don't love you the next minute. They're following your directions 1 minute, the next minute they're not. Children very much live in like 30-second sound bites, literally. So you got to kind of look at the big picture and, is this happening frequently and things like that. Sometimes it's interesting to watch, and maybe it's just because I've got the gift of hindsight and raising kids now, but sometimes I like to, if I'm out in a park or in a mall or something, I like to just watch children and parents. And it's not to judge, I'm just curious about how different people and different families interact and how children respond differently and things like that. It's just I'm a people watcher, and it's purely out of curiosity, not out of judgment. But you get certain feelings about certain interactions. So I know when I see a parent sort of walking ahead of a young child, and they're like, "Come on, let's go," in a gentle, calm way, and the child is like, I'm coming. I get just this real good sense and this good feeling about those kinds of interactions. So again, some of the stuff is so natural. When we really look at ourselves, we can get a sense of what it, that it feels right. Children look to you for comfort. You can soothe your child. Again, soothing is it can be different in different ways. Some children like to be held. Some children, when they're upset, despise being held. So take your kids' cues on this. Maybe they just need you to sit beside them. Maybe they need you to sing a song. Go back to those senses, that sense stage, because that's sort of the primal, the very first stage of attachment. So when children are needing comfort, often if you go back to one of those 5 stages or those 5 senses, you can find something that will work to soothe your child. Children take direction. So not only do they look for direction, but when you tell them to do something, they do it. Testing limits. So people don't often see this as a sign that my child is attached. They see it as something else. Children testing limits tells, hey, it's a normal process. All children need to and do test limits. But you'll often hear teachers say to parents, oh, Johnny is just he's such a joy to have in the classroom, and he's such an angel, and he's so attentive. And then they get home, or I've seen it when I was doing daycare, mom or dad shows up in the door, and it's like Johnny turns into some other child. And that's often because they're overcome with emotion when it's that daycare situation where you're picking them up. But testing, kids who don't test limits at school and test limits at home, it's okay, because home and school are so completely separate. You can't even compare them. But children who test limits, often it's because they feel so secure and safe with the parent that they know nothing really bad is going to happen. There might be a consequence, but I got to see if the consequence is going to happen every time. So you're the first testing ground because you feel safe. So it's actually when your kids are driving you crazy and testing everything, just remember that this is actually a good thing. Take a breath, be consistent as you can, and realize that this is a good thing. With very young children, crawling babies and things like that, we often want to, there's a program called Circle of Security. You can look it up. They've got some good visuals. But what you'll see with children who are well attached is they'll sit on mom's lap for a while or dad's lap, and then maybe they'll crawl off. But they're always looking back, or they'll come in and come back to the lap, and then they'll leave again. So it's this check-in process where, and even older kids will do it. Check in, see where you are, see what you're doing. Some of them may need a hug or a touch, and then they go off on their own again. Children are relaxed around you. We have a lot of restless, stressed children. So we want to see children who are relaxed and can just chill and hang out with you. This is one that we could have a lot of conversation about. Children are dependent on you. We live in a culture that promotes a lot of independence. We want and need our children to be dependent. And culturally, we think we're babying them, we're spoiling them, we're ruining them, we're not preparing them for life. Children are not prepared for life until they're between 20 and 30, when all the parts of the brain are working in a way that's cohesive and works. And independence comes from dependence first. So my youngest granddaughter, who lives here in New Brunswick, my son messaged me the other day, and he's like, okay, Lila throws her Mo, which is her Elmo, that's her comfort object, and then she screams for me to pick it up. And it's like, then pick it up. And he's like, but, and I'm like, no, but you want her to look to you to meet her needs. And because she's emotional, when she throws her Mo, I mean, that's her pride and joy, that's her object. So when she throws that, she's in some sort of emotional state, because she would never do that, but she loves him. So, but then she needs him because now she's upset because she's thrown him and he's not close. But she doesn't, she's 2, she doesn't know what to do with this. So she needs daddy to pick up Mo. And I said, ideally, you pick up Mo before she even asks you to, and you give him back. And that's the kind of dependence I'm talking about. I'm not talking, and I mean, I could argue this a little bit, but I'm not talking about that, 3 or 4-year-old that stands there and goes, dress me. We have this mentality where as soon as a child can do something once, we're like, okay, we can check that box. They will now forevermore do that thing consistently. And I argue, that adults are not that consistent about what we know and what we do. So how can we expect children to be? But development is a very up and down process. So a child that can dress himself really well may wake up in the morning and be tired, not want to go to school, feel disconnected from you, had a bad night. And in that 30-second soundbite moment, they cannot dress themselves. So rather than fight it, be the alpha, foster that dependence and say, here, let me help you. And very often, if you offer to help a child, once they feel like you're going to help them, they don't want your help anymore. A 2-year-old goes, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up. The more you say no, the more they stomp and scream and throw themselves on the floor and say, pick me up, pick me up. If you say to a 2-year-old, come here, I want to carry you, and they don't want to, no, go away. So we want to be there for our kids, but then take their cues. And there's nothing wrong with dependence. And people ask me sometimes, does this not create learned helplessness? That's a completely different thing. So dependence in a healthy way, in the attachment lens, is when a child needs something from the adult provides it. Learned helplessness is when the adult needs something and is getting it from the child by disabling, by helping too much, by taking over. But it's about who needs the help. So when we do it for ourselves and we disempower children and we sort of oppress them to meet our own needs, that's a learned helplessness risk. But a young child who needs you to be there to help them to whatever is a function of relationship and attachment. We want children to be happy and say goodbye to us, and it's not in their nature. It is not in their biological DNA, most of them, to be happy to say goodbye. And often we want them to be happy to say goodbye because it appeases us. And that's fine. It's hard to say goodbye to a crying child. But we want children to not want to be away from their attachment figures. You're their safety. You're that place they rest. You're the security. You're the one that, keeps harm away. And now we're going to hand them off to somebody they don't know. So the reason we don't get separation anxiety once a child typically has been in school for a while, let's say, is because now they have an attachment to a teacher. So now they can transfer that attachment. But when we put children into environments where there is not another attachment figure, it rattles them to the core, because it's like, who's going to keep me safe? And they could never articulate this. This is just an instinct of theirs. So children are supposed to not want to be with you. If you're one of those parents that says, bye, I'm leaving now, one of two things will happen. Neither of them which are good. So it's not a great strategy. Sometimes it works, but it may work for the wrong reasons. So the first reason is the child is so secure in their relationship with you, they know you're not leaving. So they're going to call your bluff. See ya. And it's like, okay, now you've lost all your credibility. It's like, what do I do now? And then you get mad and you go after them, right? The second reason is a fear response. So children become so afraid that you are going to leave them that they come running. And getting children to comply out of a fear response is not a good idea either. It works, but there can be some longer term consequences to that. So it's just a common scenario that I see all the time. And it's one of those moments I sit back and watch. And usually it's the child going, see ya. So then the parent walks around the corner, the child goes back into the playroom, and they're happy as a clam because they're safe in the environment. They know mama's not far away. So they're good. So it's quite funny to watch. And the bottom line is you'll just know, because attachment and this relationship piece and this context of parenting in a relationship is natural and instinctive, you're just going to know when your child is attached to you. And some days it'll feel like they really are, and other days it'll feel like they are so not. And again, that's normal. So we'll get this handout to you. So I'm not going to go through it all because I'm sure we're running out of time by now. But this is from Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, Dan Siegel wrote a great book called The Whole Brain Child. So if you're a parent, pick that one up. So that they talk about they talk a lot about being present. And you can't attach from a distance. You can't create a relationship from afar. So it requires us to not only be in physical proximity, but to be emotionally, physically present with our children, which we could have a whole conversation about that. But so there's some really good ideas in this little piece about what to do. So I'll just read sort of the taglines, if you will. So safe. Safety reduces hypervigilance and replenishes inner coping resources. So when we feel safe, we don't go into stress mode. We don't go into fight or flight. And a lot of our kids are in fight or flight a lot of the time. And when we're not in fight or flight, our bodies replenish. So we develop more coping mechanisms. We re-energize. So without energy, you can't cope. So if you're tired, if you're stressed, if things have happened in your life, the more empty the bucket is, so to speak, the less coping mechanisms and coping ability we have, even as adults. So when we are safe and we can rest, the bucket fills up. And then when things happen to us again the next day or whatever, we're more able to cope. So that idea of creating safe places for kids. Seen, this is that sixth stage really of attachment that's about a deeper knowing. So how do we convey that to our kids? One of the things we want to really think about and reflect on as parents is, what is the lens we see our kids through? So he gives a couple of examples here. So when a child is misbehaving, is it because they're attention seeking? Oh, they just want my attention all the time, and I can't give it to them, I'll spoil them. Which is a bit of a silly notion, actually. Don't we all want attention of the people that we love? Versus connection seeking. So it's a subtle difference, but when we say, oh, they just want our attention, we feel this need to push away. When we reframe that idea and say, well, they're looking for connection and attachment, it tends to make us draw closer. They're just being defiant. Defiance is often anxiety. So are they being defiant or being anxious? If they're being defiant, you're going to come back with a certain response. If you see your child as reacting in an anxious way, you're going to react in a very different way. They're lazy. Oh my God, they're so lazy. They won't do anything. Well, maybe they're not lazy. Maybe they're afraid of failing. So we really want to think about the script we have in our heads about what we tell ourselves about our children and our children's behavior. And is there an alternative explanation, an alternative word we could use that would help us respond in a gentler, more compassionate way? This is particularly hard when people are watching us. We feel under a great deal of pressure to do something when we have an audience, whether we're at the mall or in a parking lot or wherever. Children need soothing. So this one is in yellow, it's hard to read. Soothing provides comfort and develops the upstairs brain. So the upstairs brain is that frontal cortex that doesn't develop, it develops last. And the more we are soothed and we're calm, the more that part of the brain can develop. So it helps and Dan Siegel is very much about, he's a neuroscientist or something, I think. So he's very much about brain development. So again, this is a developmental lens. So we want children to be soothed, to be able to be soothed, to feel that calm. And we don't live in a very calm world, especially right now. And security, which everybody sort of equates attachment and security, and they very definitely go together. But security is about consistency, it's about boundaries, it's about children being able to predict, because those kinds of things give kids that secure ability to know, if I do this, this is going to happen. And that's even if there's a consequence, as long as it doesn't hurt them, there's a lot of security in knowing, if I do this, this is going to happen. And consequences are good too. So if I do this this thing right, then there's a more pleasant consequence. But just that consistency, Barbara Coloroso says, it's not the severity of a consequence, it's this consistency. So when children can predict things that are going to happen, it helps them feel more secure. And security is important when you're a little child and everybody else is directing your life. How are we doing for time, Christine?
It's we're at about just over the hour mark, so we can
Okay.
chat a bit more. I do have a couple of questions that have come in.
Okay, well, let's do a couple of questions and we'll. Do you want to do a couple of questions?
Okay, yeah, I can go on to that right now, no problem. I had a question a little while back, and part of it may have been answered, but we can certainly chat about it a bit more. And it's from Andy, and the question is, my toddler likes to share my bed. I've heard mixed comments about it. Are there concerns I should be cognizant of?
Sharing beds is a very personal choice. We need to understand that it works for toddlers beautifully. It's like the best, that's why they want to do it. It is the best, most comfortable, safe place that a child can possibly feel. So what we have to think of, so from a child's perspective, no harm, no foul, it works. They usually sleep really well. Where the challenge comes in is what is the family view or the parents' view on this? So some parents are very pro co-sleeping and it works for them. Other parents, like I never co-slept with my kids. It's one of the things I would probably reconsider if I was doing parenting again. But I'm one of those people that has a really hard time sleeping with something or someone in my bed. So, and kids like to move around. So if I'm not going to get the sleep I need to be able to function and parent and work and do all the things I need to do the next day because my squirming toddler or dog has kept me up all night, then you've got to find an alternative. So you like the idea, but the practicality of it doesn't work. There are alternatives. So I didn't want my kids in my bed. So I had one that was very, very clingy and needed me a lot. So probably for the wrong reasons, but for reasons nonetheless, I set her up on the floor beside me. So I said, you know, you're going to go to bed in your bed. If you get up and you need to come to my bed or to come see me and you're tired, you can sleep. And I made her a not too comfortable, but comfortable enough spot with a sleeping bag and her blanket and all that on the floor beside me. And that actually worked. And strangely enough, once she got to trust that she could come in and I wasn't going to get mad and all of that, then she actually started coming in less because the availability was there. So there are ways you can make it work if you believe that that's something you want to do, but the practicality of it doesn't work. And then there's a whole other population or belief that says, absolutely not. My kids need to sleep in their own bed. My kids need to learn to be independent, etc. And that's fine too. But what I will say about that is toddlers need support. Children need support often to go to bed. Neufeld talks a little bit about how this is the preemptive separation. This is the prototype of separation, right? I'm vulnerable, it's dark, I'm by myself, and kids just kind of intuitively know this, which is why they fight it. So if you're going to have your child sleep in their own bed, you have to be prepared to support them in that process should they need it. So if that means you lay down with them, then you lay down with them. If it means when they cry, you respond to them, then you respond to them. What I will say is it's ill-advised, in my opinion, to let a child lay in a dark room in their bed by themselves, upset and crying. That's not conducive to good quality sleep. It's not fostering the relationship or any of that. So it really is a very individual choice for your family. You should involve your spouse in the choice. It is their bed too. Because often what happens is somebody ends up on the couch and it's not usually mom. So you gotta be, you know, you either gotta have another room where somebody can be comfortable, or you've got to have, you know, you don't want it to become a bone of contention in the marriage. So there does need to be some consensus about how you're going to handle it. But just know from the child's perspective, this is what I'm designed for. And it's like baby wearing and all those kinds of things, right? Like kids are just, they're like, if they could be monkeys hanging off us all the time, they would. And that's a function of nature. That's where they feel safe and secure. So that's that one.
Thanks, Nikki. It's a big conversation always, of course, but I agree. Like, I think if you can tap into, is it working for your family that you're co-sleeping? Then you don't have a problem. If it's not working, then it's a bigger conversation that definitely needs to involve, everybody to help support what the next step might be or the next process might be. So I don't know if we have any other questions that anybody wants to unmute or jump in with at this time. Feel free. I'll keep an eye on the chat room here, but that's the only one I had.
Okay.
In the chat.
I have a question. Since I have been running after my 3-year-old during this entire presentation, there are a few details that I may have missed, and I'd love to recap everything. Is this recording going to be made available?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Since you're already registered, you'll receive the recording automatically, hopefully in the next few days or potentially. And then also you'll receive any of the follow-up resources that I know Nikki has available for us. So we'll send you some extra resources as well.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep chasing. Okay, I know we're going over time. I should probably put this up further in. So counterwill is an instinct, and it's the reaction we have of resistance and opposition. So parents, this is one of the biggest bugaboos with parents is, my child won't listen, my child does the opposite of what I say, my child always says no to me. So I'm going to show you this video of Newfeld. It's, I think, just 5 minutes. And then I'll have a very brief, if people have questions, maybe we'll start with that. If people have questions about it, and then we'll be just about done. So hang in with me.
Every child possesses the instinct to do the opposite of what is expected. This shouldn't surprise us. And yet somehow it does. We assume that a child is doing this on purpose. It isn't. It is instinctive, driven by deep instinct, by deep emotion. If we push the wrong buttons in a child, or if these emotional buttons are pushed in us, it calls forward this reaction, which we've dubbed counterwill. Say, my first son, he was in grade 11. And a brand new principal decides that on the first day of school, she is going to make an impression upon her students and gives an anti-drug message. I asked, say, how was your day? Principal thought she had to give, preach to us. And he says, you know what? I had never actually thought of doing drugs before this time. And suddenly it makes me feel like doing it. What in the world? But our whole school is based upon educational campaigns. Our whole thing is the more we can get it through their thick heads, the dangers of this, what they must do, what they have to do, what we expect of them, the more it's going to work. Our school system is crippled by counterwill. The counterwill instinct is a defensive reaction to perceived control and coercion. In other words, nobody likes to be pushed around. The counterwill is deeply rooted in instinct and emotion. Every single child, every single adult possesses this family of instincts. It throws a monkey work into parenting. And the very fact that we impose our wishes, desires, expectations calls for a defensive reaction. What in the world could this be about? Well, one way of looking at it is it's simply an expression of the basic universal principle that for every force, there's an equal and opposite counterforce. The greatest force impinging upon a child is the will of the adults who are responsible for that child. The more forceful we are in communicating our will concerning their behavior, the more likely it will call for counterwill. And the forbidden toy syndrome, you take preschoolers, they divide them into different groups depending upon the degree of coercion they use. Everything from this toy is not to play with, that's just descriptive. To, if you play with this toy, you'll really get into trouble, which alerts, of course, the child to the will of the adult. The more forceful the statement has been about not playing with this toy, the more likely the child is to play with the toy. Coercion doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It can be positive. That is, you can alert a child to the will of an adult by using reward and reinforcement. The reason I have emotional counterwill is because I had a father who had one desire for his kids, and that was for his children to be happy. I woke up to, oh, what a glorious morning. Oh, what a glorious day. And that wasn't the end of it. I heard, cheer up, funny times a day, put a smile on your face. Oh, why are you looking so intense? And the more my father worked on me, the more morose I became. And to this day, when I'm in a restaurant where somebody is, hi, having a good day, I hope everything is well with you. And I feel like saying, you can't make me be happy, only it feels like I want to punch them. You can't make me be happy? What an absurd statement. Doesn't everybody want to be happy? Yes, but my father got there first. And so it brought out the counterwill in me. It is important, and I'll keep reiterating this, very important, that in our interaction with children, we keep counterwill in mind. If we don't, again, we are going to trip all over this and actually be counterproductive, and our interactions will backfire.
So hopefully that's good news for you. Children are designed to be difficult. Counterwill there's two reasons for it. One is to keep children from being influenced by people who they're not attached to. So your children will have less counterwill if they're attached to you. And again, we're looking at that, this is 30-second threshold. It's in the moment. So children come in and out of attachment when they're young all the time. So if you're getting a lot of resistance, you need to step back and think about, in this moment, how is our relationship? Have we been fighting all morning? Have I been, distant, and now I'm coming in and I'm demanding them do something? Like, is the relationship aligned? Because the relationship and attachment is the one thing that most quickly dissipates counterwill. The other reason children have counterwill is, I can't listen to you and do what you want me to do and still be my emergent self. So sometimes it's children pushing back on you and saying, no, you can't, because I need to find my own way, or I need to be me, or I need to figure this out for myself. So those are primarily the two reasons that children will do it. The more disconnected and unattached children are in the moment, the more likely you are to see counterwill and resistance. We all have it. My biggest counterwill moment, not so much here, because there really is no traffic here in New Brunswick. If any of you are thinking about moving, there really is no traffic here. I'm terrified every time I go back to Ontario and visit now on the 401. I'm like, but anyway, when I lived in near Toronto, I would get on the, I'm a patient driver. I let people in, I signal my turns. I'm a pretty good driver. I haven't had any tickets. So I'll get on a highway and the lane will end beside me. So the ramp lane will end. And so I usually slow down. I make room for people to come in, but there's inevitably, and some of you may be this person, the ramp, the lane ends, the merge lane ends, and they're still coming. And it's like, that for me kicks out my counterwill like crazy. Because I'm like, who do you think you are? You have lots of time to get over. I've let lots of people over. And it's in my mind, I've thought a lot about this since I learned counterwill. In my mind, it's my emotional brain is saying, he feels like he's more important than you, or he feels entitled to cut in front of you. And, so it's always, they're doing it on purpose and they're doing it to me. And then my counterwill kicks in and I'm like, no, I'm not letting them in. And I would never cause an accident or anything. And inevitably, I usually let them in. But my first response is, you had your chance way back there. And no, I'm not letting you in. So we all have these moments of counterwill. And we find ways to contain ourselves and not step on the brakes or, speed up and cause accidents and things like that. But children don't have that part of the brain yet. So they're very responsive. They're very, reactive. So you get this counterwill a lot when you try to boss them around. And the most interesting thing, I think, is that the praise and rewards doesn't work because, again, it creates this instinct of counterwill. It's like, oh, you want me to be good? No, I'm not going to be, or you want me to do this and you're going to give me something good. It's still you wanting me to do it. So don't be surprised when you use some of those more positive things and you still get this counterwill thing. So the first question to ask when you get it is, how is the relationship with my child in this moment? And then it's your job, like I said earlier, to take charge of that relationship. And sometimes it means doing things that may seem counterintuitive. Walk away, do something to break the tension, do something to give them a hug, do something. And you're not rewarding the counterwill, you're realigning the relationship when you do those things. So again, it's that lens of what are you telling yourself or what are other people telling you when you do it? Your job is to always realign the relationship and then carry on with whatever it is you were doing. Because when that relationship is not there, the stuff you try is going to be much more difficult and most of the time not work. So when we talk about behavior next time, we'll talk a little bit more about counterwill, but I really wanted to touch on this and just let people know that opposition, it's not a disorder. And I mean, there are times where maybe in the DSM-5 it is a disorder, but in young children, it's most often, and I'm not a mental health professional, so I will qualify with that. But in my experience, most often, opposition and defiance is about the relationship or lack of in the moment with young children anyway. So just something to think about when your children are in that, and toddlers are full of counterwill. 2-year-olds, they wake up with counterwill. You don't even have to do anything and they have counterwill. So again, there are developmental things that happen over the course of time where some of these things are not, they're just development. Children will come in and out of it. It'll all be good, but you just have to understand it. There's a reason for it, and we respond to the reason, not the behavior. And we'll get much further with our kids. So here's a quick list of superpowers. These all build relationships. So I just put this in here as just a little reminder of it's as much about who we are and how we are with our children as it is about what we say and do. So this list is all things that we can think about, and you can see yourself, I'm sure, in this list. But these are all superpowers that will work to build that relationship, not just with your children, but with your spouse and your friends and anybody else. I would highly recommend this video. This is on YouTube now. I had to pay for it years ago, but now he's on YouTube, so it's great. This is a video, this is Neufeld, it's 2 hours, so take that into consideration. But it's one of the, I think it should be a required look. He's also written a book called Hold On to Your Kids. These should be required readings and viewings for parents and teachers. There's just so much richness to his research and to his information, and he presents it in a way that just really makes sense. And it matters, and it again reaffirms those instincts and that natural part of parenting that we often question now because there's so many messages coming at us that say, no, don't do that. So I think he helps affirm for people that what you actually think instinctively has a purpose and it has a natural biological reason. So I would highly recommend this video to you. I want to thank you for your time, and remember that sometimes real superheroes live. I can't even see the. Whoops, lost it. Come on. What does it say? Live in the hearts of small children. Sorry, all your lovely pictures were in this picture. Sometimes real superheroes live in the hearts of small children fighting big battles. And remember, small children's big battles are not the same as our big battles. Just getting up in the morning for some kids can be a big battle. So a lot of empathy and compassion goes a long way.
Thanks, Nikki.
You're welcome.
There's a couple more questions that have come in. So even if we just take a 5 minutes to go through them, it's nice to try and respond. So I think it was our mama that was at the park. So I don't know, this could be going on right now, but she, I think, has asked that she uses the tactics of starting to leave the park because that's, I guess, what things resort to. But what else could she try? Because it doesn't seem that anything else is working for her in that situation.
Did you say how old her child is?
No, and if she's still here, maybe she can chime in. I'm not sure if she's still on our call. She might be chasing at the park still.
Yeah.
Oh, she's 4.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
So 4-year-olds like to be the boss. And none of us like to leave places that we're having a good time at. So a few strategies. One is, and I'm sure you do this, give her notice. 5 more minutes. We say 5 more minutes to kids all the time, or 10 more minutes. But the problem is that kids don't have any sense of time until they're like 9. So they don't know what 5 minutes is, and all of a sudden it creeps up on them. So set your watch, bring a timer with you, something that sort of gives them a cue. But understand that 5 more minutes without some sort of cue really means very little to them. So 5 minutes will come up and shock them, and they'll be like, what? And it's because they don't have a sense of time yet. But it's a good way to build that sense of time. So if you're consistent and 5 minutes is actually 5 minutes and not 25 minutes, children will learn over time what 5 minutes kind of feels like without understanding the concept. So it's important that we give kids time. It's important to know that kids don't transition well. Particularly boys have a much more difficult time than girls, but young children don't transition well. They don't move from one thing to another. So we can try and make it fun, try and make it a game. We want to keep it as positive as we can. Here, you lead the way. Here's the keys to the car. Show me where the car is. Find some other, give them we're going to go, and it's kind of bribery, but maybe not. We're going home to have a snack, or we'll try not to resort to, we'll stop at Tim Hortons for donuts and things like that. But if you're desperate, sometimes we do what works. But it's important for kids to know what's coming next. Imagine a life where you got up and somebody else was in control of everything you did, right from what you wore to what you ate to what activities you were going to participate in and when you were going to do things, but they never told you. So narrate through the day if you can with your kids. So, okay, we're going to go to the park. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. If you need pictures can be great. Little storybooks. We call them social stories for daycares. They use them in daycare centers where they just use little pictures on Velcro strips. So, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And then when you've done one, you can take it off the strip. So give her, at 4, you can give her some of the control if you can. Worst case scenario, at some point, and you'll need to decide when that point is, you may actually have to pick her up. It is not my favorite strategy. I like to try all the other things first, but we can't allow our children to take over. There's room for negotiation. I'm all about teaching kids how to negotiate things. But at some point, you're still the boss. And it's like, okay, are you going to walk to the car with me, or am I going to carry you? As opposed to, I'm leaving without you. Because I'm leaving without you creates an anxiety response. Or maybe it doesn't, because she knows you won't. So you want to be seen and felt like you're supporting her and you're trying to work with her. But at some point, and it's your point, not hers, we're going to go. So here's the conditions we're going to go in. Either you ride your bike or I carry you, and you do it lovingly. Maybe you put them up on your shoulders. Whatever you can do that's positive to get her to move along, but understand how difficult it is for young children to move along. But we still need to be the boss at the end of the day. So sometimes while they're still small enough, and you can pick her up and tickle her while you're walking. Like it doesn't have to be a, come on, we're going, and, stomping out of the playground. It can be a, I'm going to tickle you all the way to the car, or I'm going to, so kids live for games. Life is just a big game, and we're so serious, and we're very work oriented, and children are very play oriented. If we can find ways to play with our kids and joke and game our kids and sing with our kids to move them into different things, it can sometimes work. If you have an alpha child, that's a whole other thing. So if you've got a kid that is or feels like they're the boss of the family, we would have a longer conversation. But more often than not, it's just this developmental thing. And I don't want to leave. This is, and you want to empathize. You're having such a good time. Take some video. I mean, let's use our technology for something good. Take some video of her and say, you know what? Let's go home and look at the video of you playing. Or when you pushed yourself on the swing, or let's go home and look at the movie. Let's go show daddy the movies. Those kinds of things. Let's take pictures. Let's make a storybook. So give her good reasons to kind of, rather than just, come on, it's time to go, which is most often what we do. And that is 99% of the time going to give you Counterwill. Nope, we're not going.
Those are great suggestions. I think, yeah, definitely also touching base with like empathizing, right? I know you don't want to do this. Like that's a big part. They want us to know that we're, at least understanding that. We may not agree with them, but they want us to know that we understand that. So, and Tanya, our music teacher, has said, try singing.
Yes.
So she's coming in from a musical perspective. Love it, Tanya. Thank you.
Maybe you've got a bag of stuff that they don't usually access, so a little secret mystery bag or something in the car. Those can work really well, usually for younger kids. 4-year-olds are wise to us by then usually, but maybe there's something that she would really like to do that you can do in the car. But again, will just help her transition, because transitions are hard.
Great. I just wanted to let you know, Nikki, that Marina says hi, and it's so glad to hear from you again. So I think
Hi, Marina.
an old friend. And I have one more question here. It's a little bit about what we're talking about. So when experiencing resistance, what are some ways to realign the relationship?
Great question. So the first thing you have to do is stand back and find your own calm. Because what children need is not more emotion from you. That escalates things to a 10 very quickly for you and them. So really it's about, how do you find your center? Do you deep breathe? Do you close your eyes? Try not to walk away, because that feels to a child like you're abandoning them. So if you're going to walk away, and sometimes it's a strategy, what you say to the child, if it's safe, is, I'm going to go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. Would you like one? So you're walking away with kind of a purpose and something that you're going to help them with as well. So that can work. Sometimes you just need to sit and do nothing. But the key is you've got to find your calm place, because the best response to Counterwill is a calm response. As soon as we respond to our kids with our own big emotions, it sets off all sorts of cortisol in them and in us, and it seldom works out well. And we lose control. Let's be honest. We say things, we do things, that we would never do if we were in a calm state. And so do our kids. When they hit you and kick at you and spit at you, and those are not intentional actions. Those are very reactive, emotional responses. So it's telling you there's a feeling there. So the first thing is to step back out of the opposition, because if you go in there guns blazing and you push back on the counterwill, you're going to do this. No, I'm not. You're going to do this. You're probably going to lose. And at the very least, if you win, it's not going to feel very nice for everybody. So find your calm and then figure out what the relationship means. So again, maybe it's a bit of a distraction. You sing a song, you start looking at pictures, you give the child, come here, you need a hug. And if a child is in a place where they actually can process that, they may just fall into your arms, right? Because kids don't like to be in this state either. So we want to think of ways that we can align them, put the relationship back together in that moment, so that the attachment and you're the alpha and the child's the dependent. If the child is doing it because they're trying to manifest their own independence, then you might want to think about a way to make that work. So you might want to back off and say, okay, you want to do this by yourself. 2-year-olds tying their shoes. We know they can't, but the last thing they want to hear is that you can't tie your shoes. You don't know how to tie your shoes. They're trying to emerge with this independence. So where we can, we want to maybe facilitate it and stand back and say, okay, I'm going to watch you. Let you tie your shoes. And then when the child realizes they can't do it and they have a little bit of a meltdown, you put your alpha pants on and you give them a hug and you say, would you like me to help you, or would you like to try it by yourself again? This stuff takes time, and that's always the barrier. Is we are usually, when there's counterwill involved, it's because we're under a time crunch. If you observe and document when this happens, it's very often about us. So if we can step back and take a little bit of time, it actually takes less time than a counterwill battle. So while it may feel like, okay, they can't tie their shoes, and I know if the counterwill is because of an emergent need to be independent, you want to facilitate that a little bit. If it's just because you said it's time to go and they're like, no, it's not, our counterwill kicks in and we're like, oh, yes, it is. And we go back to that thing where I say, I'm the boss. What kind of boss do you want to be? So you get down at the child's level and you empathize and you say, I know you're having so much fun. You really don't want to do this. Teaching your kids deep breathing helps you and them. So if you can get into that routine of something like deep breathing, or some sort of sing a song, Britannia, something that helps calm them down. And then that gives you a bit of time to figure out the next response. But the relationship has got to be in that right place in order for the counterwill to kind of be dissipated. So you got to be creative, have fun. It's not a fun time, but if you can make it a game, take note of things that work and write them down somewhere. Because when we get emotional or we get stressed with our kids, we have a toolbox of things that work, but we don't always have access to them. We don't always remember what those tools are. So try, leave yourself sticky notes or something and plan ahead. If you know you're going to transition soon, think about it before you say the words. So have a bit of a plan. We've got to leave grandma's house in 10 minutes. This is not going to be happy. And think a little bit for 5 minutes about how you might do this. So you might want to sit with the child and play with them for a few minutes, because playing with your children connects you. And you may have to do things in small steps instead of just a big, we're going from playing at grandma's to get in a car. So those kinds of things. But think about the relationship first, and certainly center your own energy as much as you can.
Great. Okay, one last question. I think I'm going to tie it in on a little bit of a general level, because I think this is probably something that affects all of us as parents from time to time, especially in the day of, many more parents are working from home more. But it's about, like, how do you keep that connection in place when there's other things happening? So the example is, as soon as I get on the phone, the child wants my attention. And it might be, as soon as there's a meeting on the computer or things like that. So how do we set our connection piece, I guess, up for success, but we also have all these other
Competing
responsibilities?
priorities.
Yes.
And it's hard. I mean, working from home sounds like a great idea, but when you've got little kids, you've got to remember your kids don't understand that you're working because they're not in work mode. So it's like, but you're here. Why are you not accessible? It's one of the biggest frustrations for kids to have a closed door and somebody on the other side saying, no, you can't bother mommy or daddy right now. It's but they're right there. So it's a very difficult concept for kids to understand, first of all. When kids are trying to get in the middle of it is because it's that belonging, loyalty thing. It's all that attachment stuff that says your attention is somewhere else and I need it to be with me. And little kids are not good at understanding that they can't always have your undivided attention. That's something that they develop over time and they kind of have to learn. So depending on the meeting and what's happening and how adaptable your boss is about things, sometimes you can put a child on your lap, depends on the child, and they're good. Sometimes they can be playing and you can just kind of hold their hand out of camera view. If you can try and make it work so that if it's appropriate and the child can manage it and you're not going to get fired, which are a lot of ifs, setting them up to play in the same room without the expectation of you need to be quiet. Because again, if you say to a child, you have to be quiet, what are you going to get? You're going to get counterwill. You're going to get the opposite reaction. So try not to give kids that long list of the do's and the don'ts and just give them something they don't necessarily always play with. Sensory stuff is always great to keep kids engaged. So water, sand, Play-Doh, shaving cream. So sensory experiences, it's things like that, coloring. If you've got a colorer, don't make a child who doesn't like to color. But trying to work with the child's needs can be helpful. If you have to put them with somebody else, then give them a time. So again, telling kids what will come next. So mommy has to do this call. Don't go into long explanations about this is my boss and he's going to fire me if you're not good and if I don't go to this. Excuse me? Like I'm 3. I don't care about any of that stuff. So you really have to think about what it is the child needs, not again what you need, right? So what does the child need in order to make it work for you instead of the other way around? So trying to find things for them to do. If you've got somebody else in the house that can take the child outside, that's sort of ideal. Go for a walk, whatever. But give the child something to look forward to after your call or whatever. So attachment, sometimes it's not about the big long periods of time we spend with kids. So if you know you're going to be on an hour-long call, if you can, during the time before that call, you want to really focus as much as you can in small doses, 5 minutes at a time, connecting with your child so that they fill up over the course of the morning, let's say. And then they're more able to let go of you for a little bit while you have your meeting because they've been filled up. If you've been busy all day and distracted and all of that all day long, and now you're like, now this is really important, you cannot, the child's already empty and it's like, oh no, this doesn't work for me. This isn't going to cut it. So try and spend little bits of time, even if you're working from home, checking in with your child, play with your child for 5 minutes, eat lunch with your child, have a snack, whatever you can manage in your schedule. Because conceivably, this is one of the reasons we're supposed to be able to work from home. So that your child is filled up before that sort of really important meeting or call that you may have later in the day.
Sounds good. Great tips.
Not easy. Kids don't
know.
understand.
No, they don't. Working from home can be a blessing, but it can also be, a major challenge for sure.
I ran a daycare in my house for 4 years when my son was 2, thinking that this would this would give me more time with my own kids. I had 2 kids in school as well as my 2-year-old. And I thought, this is going to be great. My kids can come home from school at the end of the day instead of going to daycare. And it was awful. My kids hated it
Mhm.
because I wasn't available.
Mhm.
But for my son, he had to share me all day long. So there was 4 other kids in the house taking my attention. So he bit every kid that came in, just sort of as an initiation. And I mean, I had more freedom when I worked because I could take vacation days and things like that to go on like field trips and stuff like that. And once I did home daycare, if I went on a field trip with one of my kids, I was leaving 4 people without care to go to work. I couldn't do it. So it's really hard for kids to understand the whole work from home thing. And it doesn't always make you more available.
It's very true. Very true. Well, I think that's the end of our questions. And I just want to take a moment and say, like, I've, really appreciated having this time with you, Nikki, and going over the different steps and of how to connect and what attachment looks like. I know that it's something that even with grown children, like you said, it's a relationship thing. It's not with just little ones. So it's nice to touch base with all of that. I just wanted to let everyone on the call that is still here know that I will send some of the information, the recording out. I'll see if I can find the link to that Gordon Neufeld recording that's on YouTube, and I'll send that as well. And to remind you that we have another session with Nikki. I wrote it down here, October 17th. 18th. Thank you. Yep. No, October 18th at 2:00 as well. So the same time. And that is on like big feelings, right? Big feelings,
big behavior.
Yeah.
That's the link between sort of kids' emotional lives and kids, what do we do with the behaviors that we would like to not see.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm going to sign off and keep your eyes open to your emails. And thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.